Now, let's welcome our main speaker for tonight, Joe.
Hi, my name's Joe Hawk, and I'm an alcoholic. It's good to be here. I feel like I was just here, and I probably feel that way because I was. And that's not always the case. Sometimes I feel things that have absolutely nothing to do with reality. My feelings very seldom tell me the truth, even now after almost 21 years. Feeling good, I can be in big trouble. Feeling bad, I can be closer to God than when I'm feeling comfortable. Stuff like that. I don't know why I thought of this story tonight. I was at a meeting a couple Saturdays ago. It's kind of a sensitive group on the other side of Santa Monica, and a cockroach. There's kind of a space in the center. They're kind of around, and a cockroach crawled halfway through the center of the room, and half the room gasped out of shock seeing the cockroach, and then somebody stepped on the cockroach, and the other half of the sensitive people in the room gasped at someone killing the cockroach. And I thought, I didn't really give a fuck whether it was there or whether it was killed. A cockroach is like, I had friends in prison that were cockroaches. You tie a string to a cockroach and send a cigarette to the cell next to you. And they're useful servants. They're not really pests. Some people think they're pests. And I also don't kill things anymore. I try not to. And that doesn't have to be physically. I'm sure we've all had people in our lives we literally wrote off as dead that, just made us uncomfortable one time. They might as well be dead. We kill them in our mind. I've worked with women who are librarians who have bigger inventories filled with violence than tramp steamers and mafia guys. I know a guy once that heard a fist step from a guy who later went into the witness protection program, and then he put a contract on the guy that heard his fist step. And the guy that heard the fist step had to go to this motorcycle gang in Denver and get the contract taken off. And about 7 years later, I saw the guy from the witness protection program at Fountain in Fairfax. And he looked at me and I looked at him, and he didn't say a word and I didn't say anything either. What's the difference between that fear? Nothing. I'm a hope-to-die alcoholic. To drink again is to die doesn't scare me. It didn't work in the beginning, and it doesn't work anymore. I'm not afraid of drinking anymore, because I know I don't have nothing to do with it. And for a long time, if you would have asked me my primary purpose, I would have said to stay sober. And it's funny that I chose the only thing I can't do as my primary purpose. And once you see that, your primary purpose becomes seeking something that already is, keeping you sober. And the effort that drops from your shoulders is like 1,000 pounds. You remember those times when it's usually like, I don't know, somewhere between 9 months and a year and a half where you're just going, busy. You got 17 commitments, and you're a secretary at 5 meetings, and you're going to 3 meetings a day, and you think you're doing a lot to keep yourself sober. And these funny people that do the steps out of the big book, who are supposed to practice love and tolerance of others, make fun of you. And they say things like, well, do you really have a choice? When you say things like, today I have a choice. And when that illusion is broken, you start seeking God, and you realize there's nowhere you don't even have to turn that far to find Him. I mean, it's already there if you're sober, if you're an alcoholic. If you're sober, it's either a great accomplishment and you've overcome something that no human power can, or you're not alcoholic, or you're an alcoholic in the denial of the grace of God. And I've been there. the denial of the grace of God is a form of denial that was much stronger than my denial of the disease, because I pretty much, you know, when you've been a therapist and you've worked in treatment, drinking, and you've been to treatment 10 times as a patient, you know, for me, I don't know about you, but working in treatment is no different than being a client. I'm there for the same reason, and that's to find out an answer to a question I never got answered. And people didn't believe that. When I became a counselor, they actually thought I was interested in helping somebody else. I was interested in drinking with the director of the program I was working for and whoever else wanted to buy me some alcohol and getting off parole and finding out the answer to a question that was still there when I was a client, 5 or 6 more times after being a therapist. And the question is, what's wrong with me? And the funny thing is, that question for me doesn't just come up once when I'm new. It's like, you know, thinking that you're not an agnostic and then reading the chapter to the agnostic and seeing that you're a newcomer and that you're full of agnosticism, and then thinking, well, I'll never be an agnostic again. I mean, it's like the book should say, once an agnostic, always an agnostic. It's just going to be new stuff. I've had stuff every single time that I've submitted myself to one of the parts of our program where, you know, I can be 20 years sober and have some doubt about God in certain areas of my life. I can be filled with agnosticism again. I think agnosticism rebuilds in the direct proportion to the ego rebuilding. And that's not something I read about when I was new. I'm saddened sometimes that a piece of literature that was approved by Alcoholics Anonymous, nowadays you have to buy it from Hazleton or get it off the internet, and it doesn't come from AA anymore. And that's the stuff that Dr. Harry Tebow wrote about, the dry drunk syndrome, and how the ego can rebuild after having a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps. And that whole debate goes all the way back to our founders. And the debate, which I'm not interested in anymore because the one side of the debate hasn't worked for me, the debate is 1 through 9 once and live the rest of your life in 10, 11, and 12, or 1 through 9 on a regular basis. Now, one of our founders fell victim to that belief, Bill, who I also know I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him, nor would any of us. And I know that he helped thousands of people. And I know that for many, many years, if you've ever read Pass It On, the man suffered from severe depression. He tried all kinds of things except the very thing that he'd come up with, until he did, until Dr. Bob encouraged him to go through the steps again, because Dr. Bob was real big on 1 through 9 on a regular basis, which is what I've had to do. Personally, I don't know anybody who's ever finished amends, the ones they're consciously aware of, made their approaches, even though some of them are ongoing, who wouldn't want to do that again. So I'm kind of leery of people who say they've done 1 through 9, and then, you know, they found everything they've ever wanted for the rest of their sobriety. Because when I got on the other side of my first set of amends, which was a list of about 300, and that's not because I'm a big-time gangster or anything, it's because I just lived in a lot of different places, and wherever I live, I hurt people. And I got on the other side of that first list, and I was not even the same person. And since then, I've had times where things that you should feel passionate and excited about, that you were really pumped up about 6 months earlier, or a year earlier, or a year and a half earlier, they all start to seem kind of flat. You know, working with others is kind of, and your marriage, or your girlfriend, or the job, or what you're doing in your life, it's all kind of like, And then people will say, well, I've worked the program. And then they'll go off to Est or Millennium or down the street to the church, and they'll start doing something instead of, rather than along with, Alcoholics Anonymous. And they'll just become members of 1/3 of the program again. And I understand that. But I didn't understand that when I was new, because I thought going to meetings and not drinking was not only something I was doing, but that it was going to treat my alcoholism. And I was fortunate. I got sober in Denver, Colorado in 1982, and I was fortunate to fall in with people who believed in all 3 parts of the program. Some people say they do, but they don't even know what 3 parts you're talking about. Some people say they're involved, and the steps are even kind of hip to talk about nowadays. They weren't 15 years ago when I moved here. It wasn't hip. Now they talk about the work, and it's nice to talk about, and it can be hip to talk about, but it's not hip to do. It's really kind of like the last resort for the people that are already in the last resort. It's kind of like the last door in the last hotel that you can possibly go to, to really give yourself to all three parts of the program. But I didn't know that when I was new. I just didn't know that. And, I had a pretty rough history. But most of the history that I could share with you has nothing to do with why I say I'm alcoholic, because I know lots of members of Alcoholics Anonymous who have none of that history, that are just as much alcoholic as I am. I also didn't know that our big book describes 4 types, or you could say that it describes 7 types, because in the doctor's opinion he describes 3 types, but he's kind of an outsider. Didn't really have our disease. He had an opinion. And a lot of people in AA have opinions about alcoholism, but they don't. They're the same as Dr. Silkworth. They don't have the disease. And he described 3 types, my type included. He describes a psychopath. That's not my type. He describes a manic depressive. About a whole chapter could be written. Then he describes a man normal in every respect except in the effect alcohol has on him. He's able, friendly, intelligent, and I like to think that I was that type when I was new. And boy, did I love it when you said I was the most important person in the room. I thought, finally, I've arrived somewhere where they recognize my importance. Because I don't think the new person is the most important person in the room. I believe that the lifeblood of Alcoholics Anonymous comes from the newcomer. Absolutely. But they're no more important than the guy that the blood flows through, the heart of AA. These guys that are just there. They're just there. And they still care. Like the man that was there 21 years ago in a treatment center in the basement of an AA meeting in the basement of a treatment center, and he didn't really want to be there that night. But for some reason, and he was never there after. Of course, I like to think it was just for me to hear him, because that's what I'm focused on. And when I'm new, you all tell me a lot of stuff that reinforces that belief about me. You're the most important person in the room. We love you unconditionally. Boy, drink again. And see how the fear of you drinking again just permeates the group to the point where they'd forget you in a week, And and I'm new and I'm confused. And that's a great place. I've yet to meet many newcomers that had all the answers. They might think they do, and they usually drink. I've had several times in sobriety I thought I had all the answers, and the next inventory usually shows me that one of the pitfalls of being human and an alcoholic is that what you believe is true. It is. You're stuck with your own truth until you find out it's either true or it's not. And inventory after inventory after inventory shows me that. I'm also glad to say that my experience is not based on my first inventory. If I was living a life based on what I saw 19 or so years ago in my first inventory, if that was if that was the gauge by which I judge my life today, I would have to tell you I'm a saint. Compared to the way it was 19 and a half years ago, I carried a .357 Magnum in the trunk of my car, 6 months sober. Didn't know why. They talk about alcoholic paranoia. Do you think alcoholic paranoia ends when alcohol ends? I don't know about you, but my paranoia got worse after I didn't have any solution to pour on it anymore. I understand drinking for oblivion. That was my only hope toward the end the last few years. Oblivion's not bad, I think blackouts are the grace of God for people like us. I love when I hear somebody get up and say I was a blackout drinker, and then they tell you specific after specific after specific funny stories about their drinking. I cannot pull up funny stories from my drinking, even though for 6 years I had a ball. But it's not funny. It's not funny to me. It might be ridiculous, it might be insane, But I've never been able to make cute stories out of my story because I hurt really bad. I hurt really bad before I ever took a drink. And thank God alcohol took that hurt away. I'm absolutely convinced I better thank God for alcohol. Because I'm convinced when I look at the way I felt before I took my first drink, I would have blown my head off or found something, I don't know if I would have found something that worked to treat that thing that we have in common, that's part of my story, that joins me to you, rather than the drama and where it took me that separates me from you. And what I was born with, I think, is a gift. I was born with a yearning for something that I didn't have a name for. I think my drinking and my drug use was a spiritual search to find something to cure that emptiness that was there before I ever took a drink, which we call, a lot of people will tell you it's a two-part disease. But don't let people read your big book for you. A lot of people think the big book says that I'm supposed to tell you in a general way what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. That's not what it says. I'm supposed to tell you in a general way what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now, but I always want to turn I into it. So I don't have to take any responsibility for I. I want to put it on it. I want to tell you my alcoholism was about it making me drink. I want to tell you my resentment was about it making me angry. Because I don't want to take any responsibility. And if I can keep it out here on you or it or something or someone, I don't have to take any responsibility. But what I can tell you what I was like, I was a lonely, withdrawn, very quiet, shut down, sad, young kid who should have been really happy. My brothers and sisters were. We weren't surrounded in poverty. We had opulence, money, spoiled, given everything I ever wanted. And I had this emptiness before I ever took a drink. I used to daydream in my family's, I'm talking age 10, 11. I took my first drink when I was 12, but before I took my first drink, I can remember daydreams in the backyard, playing, that a spaceship was going to come and a little green man was going to get out, and they were going to tell me, you weren't born here on this planet. We brought you here as a teeny baby, and it didn't work, and we're taking you back. You failed. And when I read in the doctor's opinion that part of my disease separates me and differentiates me like a distinct entity, boy, did I understand that from even before I took a drink. When I read a paragraph in the chapter to the agnostic that describes the spiritual malady better than any paragraph in our book, that our first speaker talked about, it describes me before I ever took a drink. You know, the only time that spiritual malady doesn't fit me is when alcohol made it go away. It's funny that alcohol treats alcoholism. And everything I've ever craved is what kills me. And I crave what I think I'm after, but it's not really what I'm after. It's just another thing. It's just another substance. It's just another, except for alcohol. Alcohol also brought about every promise in our big book. You've all probably been to some groups that'll tell you there's only 12 promises. And they come halfway through the 9th step. What kind of hope is that for a new person who says in the back of their mind, they're not going to tell you, but in the back of their mind they're saying those promises will never happen for me because I can't get myself through those amends. And that's absolutely right. The I that starts step 1 is not the I that ends up at the end of step 8. If you're not a different person and there isn't some power in your life to go back to those people you know you'll never be able to go back to or even find them, then those promises are like a dream. Right? But there's promises at the first step. What'll happen if you fully concede to your innermost self? I thought for a long time that admitting I was an alcoholic had something to do with what kept me sober. I've seen a lot of people who admitted that they were alcoholic drink again. I've seen a lot of people work the steps, drink again. I've seen a lot of people go to more meetings than most anybody, drink again. And to me, it always comes back to one thing that I think Lois said as kind of a warning to the wives, and that is that God has either removed the obsession or he hasn't. And there's nothing worse for those of us in this program that try to help other alcoholics than to think that you can get somebody done where the obsession or the grace of God hasn't come into their life. Our book even says it's a waste of time. You can love them. You can let them know where the place to come. But even talking to someone who cannot or will not grab onto what we have to offer might even cause harm for a future chance. You blow somebody out on the whole program of Alcoholics Anonymous when they're new, and then they go back out and they'll say, my God, the whole program's been laid out for me and didn't work. You know, I always thought that phrase, pearls before swine, was some kind of arrogant statement from the Bible, that it was just arrogant. Who am I to think that I have any kind of pearls? It's not that kind of a statement. It's a statement that you don't give to a pig something he ain't going to appreciate. And I'm a pig. I'm not a chicken. That's a whole nother story, but and that's where I learned. That story helped me learn how to ask people stuff in Alcoholics Anonymous. I got sober in Denver in 1982, and I used to love to go to this Monday night meeting, and I didn't know why I liked going there, because it was old, crusty guys and a few women who pissed me off. But I didn't know what I was feeling was the kind of love an alcoholic has for another alcoholic, and that's the kind of love that transcends how you might feel about what they have to say. It has to do with caring more whether you live or die than how you might feel about what they have to say. And I remember being there one night. I remember lots of nights, but a couple nights I remember. One night I remember they were talking about those promises halfway through the 9th step, and that I think they're on page 83 or whatever, and I said, well, how the hell do you get the promises on page 83? And this old boy looked at me and he said, do everything from 1 to 82. I said, damn, that's pretty simple. You mean if I do everything from page 1 to 82, what's on 83 is going to happen? He said, yeah, that's the way the book's laid out. Tells you what to do, tells you what to watch for, tells you what's going to happen, tells you what's going to happen if you don't, and it tells you what will happen if you do. I didn't know that book was a textbook. I thought it was a book I was supposed to read to relate to. And if I related, then I was a member. That's what they said I should read the stories. And I didn't read. And I didn't read that the main purpose of this book is to show another alcoholic precisely how we have recovered, not how we've stayed recovering. Anybody who says they're recovering probably isn't, or doesn't believe in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, the promise that our founders gave us, which none of them had more than 4 years, right? Bill got sober in 35. The book was printed in 39. And on the first page of the first forward of the first edition of the first printing of the first big book, they said, this is a story about how more than 100 men and women have recovered, not how they've stayed recovering. And I don't suffer from the false modesty that some people in Alcoholics Anonymous suffer from, who want to believe that the program doesn't work. And they don't even know they're telling you the program doesn't work. This is as good as it's get. I'm out of here. You're going to die if you drink? That doesn't scare me. I come from the penitentiary. By the time I was 21, they sent me to the Michigan State, 19. They sent me to the Michigan State Penitentiary from the kind of family I came from that's not heard of. But it was. Biggest thing that ever happened with my two brothers and my sister was one of them got divorced once, and he was like excommunicated and disowned from the entire family. He's the only one that turned out halfway normal and has a great life and is free. Right? I tried to be my dad until it damn near killed me. I had to realize I'm me, not him. I'm having fun being me now, not trying to live up. My mother settled that for me a long time ago when I took her on a trip. And at the end of the trip, she said, you outdid your dad. And I thought, my God, that's all I ever wanted to hear. There's nothing else I ever wanted to, you know? So I was this lonely, empty, withdrawn child that was suffering from a spiritual malady. What's a spiritual malady? If that sounds like esoteric or out there or strange, a spiritual malady is when you're shut off from your spirit, period. And I don't think that's a malady anymore. I think it was a gift. I think it was a gift because I've seen a lot of people who don't have that spiritual malady that develops into some kind of life-threatening behavior, whatever program they might end up in. I've seen people that don't suffer from that spiritual malady who just lead kind of this kind of life. You know, 20 years at the same job. They hate their wife, but they'll never tell them. They just put up with the way things are, pull themselves up by their bootstraps. They have everything they'll ever need within themselves. I am really glad that I was shut off from my spirit because it led to me craving something to fill that up. And I eliminated all the options to filling that up, and then it was just me and alcohol. And then I was given the grace to be sober, and I didn't take it for granted. And a lot of people take that grace period. You call it a cute little name like Pink Cloud. It takes a lot of the heat off of it. You're given a period of grace to do the work that's necessary to recover, or you don't. It's kind of like if you could imagine two merry-go-rounds, and both of them are enclosed, like with paneling. They're closed in, and each one has a little window. How many times are those two windows going to line up in your life for you to step through into another life in the grace of God? I don't know. We've all seen it. You know, those guys that really scare you. Not the guys that go back out, or the women that go back out and get themselves back to a meeting, or somebody brings them back to a meeting. I'm talking about the ones that we know that really, really in their heart want to be sober and they can't. They were given the grace, they were given the chance, and they didn't take the chance to do what's necessary to recover. They made other things more important. Well, I'll get to those amends later, because now I'm working on making a life. How are you going to have a life in the present if you're still stuck by guilt from the past and people you've harmed plaguing you in the middle of the night? My sponsor always says, if the goal is to be in touch with a quiet voice within, how are you going to ever hear that quiet voice if you're plagued by noisy voices from the past? And I had a lot of harm, and I didn't have the power to make those amends. There seems to be, in the other part of our book that mentions 4 types of alcoholics, and if somebody ever says to you that there are different types of alcoholics, just say, yeah, and they're described in our big book in the chapter to the wives, one of the lost chapters in my life for periods of time. I tend to stay in that part of the book that covers the first 12 steps and forget that those last chapters cover practicing these principles in all our affairs, like marriages and the family and that kind of stuff, and wondered why those areas of my life were empty. But in the chapter to the wives, they talk about type number 1. He may or may not be alcoholic, and if you're alcoholic and you don't think there's a lot of people in this program that are not like you better think again, because this program is filled with people that do not have alcoholism. They just choose not to drink and everything gets better. They stop drinking and the disease goes away because it was just a bad habit. But I understand an alcoholic who says, you know, I found myself sober one day and I've been showing up here at the Marina Center and my disease got worse the longer I was sober, because all that stuff I've been pouring booze on all these years starts to come to the surface, multiplied by 18 years. The stuff that was there before I ever took a drink. Now it's 18 years older. I drank from age 12 to 30. I couldn't have gone any further. It was only by the grace of God that I was pulled out of this street in Denver, Colorado, where I had a little car, but I was moving from hotel to hotel in my last year of drinking on this Colfax Avenue, East Colfax Avenue in Denver, and I don't even know today why I thought I had to move every 3 or 4 days. I wasn't doing anything illegal. Drugs were out of the picture. My daily thing was to get a bottle of vodka, a big bottle of vodka, 2 big bottles of vodka if I could. And then every 3 or 4 days I thought I had to move to another hotel. And I guess that was alcoholic paranoia. And I bring that to the program. And I bring a pattern from those 18 years of drinking into the program that goes like this. If it feels bad, I avoid it. And if it feels good, I do it to the max. And I bring that pattern to Alcoholics Anonymous, and it damn near killed me for almost 15 years, because my program became about avoiding pain and anything that makes me uncomfortable rather than going through it to the other side. I mean, any pain that comes into your life in any area of your life, if you don't face it now, it's going to come back around in the next relationship or the next time, if you get the chance to have the next time. And you can be in pain and at peace at the same time. And my mind would not have comprehended that 5 years ago, 10 years ago. My mind said, if you're in pain, I don't care if it's physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, if you're in pain, you got to do A, B, and C to get out of the pain before you're back at peace. And that's a horrible way to live. You're just in a pain avoidance program. Anyone or anything that makes you uncomfortable has to go. But that's no different than my drinking. Some of you drank, and anybody that got in the way of that drinking had to go, right? If you're new, you're thinking you're having trouble coming to believe in a power greater than yourself, look at the power greater than yourself that you had absolute faith in for a while. You were its servant. You went where it said. You got a drink, you go over here. Alcohol was a power greater than myself that solved the spiritual malady for a long period of time until it didn't anymore, and then all there was oblivion. And I thought that's going to be like the rest of my life. So when you told me to drink again is to die, that doesn't scare me coming from the streets of Detroit and Chicago and New York and the Michigan State Penitentiary and heroin and walking away from that life and prison. Doesn't scare me. But when somebody said, you might go on living, feeling the way you're living, feeling, with 3.5 years sober, or 4 years sober, or 7 years sober, you might go on feeling the way you're feeling for a long time, because alcoholics do not usually die quick deaths. Alcoholics, if you've ever watched very many die long, painful, horrible deaths. And I think probably everybody in this room knows you do not have to drink alcohol again to die of alcoholism. You can die of alcoholism right here. You hear it all the time. Oh, Charlie. Charlie was a, I hope there was no Charlie that killed themselves. I'm just using that. Joe, old Joe. Old Joe was 21 years sober. He used to speak. Boy, he sounded good. And he was always happy. He seemed to be, pretty pleasant. Sometimes he was a little rude or cruel. And they found him hung in his garage one day, happier than hell, right? Right? And a lot of people will say, well, how could I possibly drink again? I haven't had the obsession for 17 years. Nobody who drank again had the obsession until they did either. And we don't get to hear from a lot of them. And please don't think somebody else's research is doing anything for you. Don't thank the next guy that went out for doing research for you. He didn't do research for you. Hopefully you've done enough research to be convinced of two vital points. Do you lose control over the amount once you start? And when you stop, can you keep yourself stopped? And that kind of blows the theory of just don't drink no matter what. If you can just not drink no matter what, you're either in denial and you're alcoholic, or you're not an alcoholic and you can do that. But I don't think that everybody that says they choose not to drink today is lying. Some of them are telling you their truth because they're type number 1. They may or may not be alcoholic. It's not even our job to even care whether they're alcoholic or not unless they ask you for help. Type number 2 starts to get in a little bit of trouble. I don't think that trouble has to do with much out here. I think it's in here. Maybe they're losing control more. The progression is starting. You have those times where you can't get drunk. Remember that? Drinking right back to sober. Or you're with the right guys that you want to be tough and drink a huge amount with, and you have a couple and your tolerance is all fucked up and you're flat on your face after a couple drinks. It's just not going the way you want it to. That's what it means to be powerless. If you have power over alcohol, then drinking would go the way you'd want. I heard a guy one time say, I'm alcoholic because every time I drank, I wanted to get drunk. I got drunk. Every time I drank. I said, did you want to get drunk every time you drank? He said, yeah. I said, then you're not powerless. It went the way you wanted every time you drank. Because alcoholics had those times they didn't want to get drunk, and they did. And they didn't want to break her heart, and they did. And they drank past choice. And I drank past choice before 19. Before I was 7 years into my drinking, and I was having a ball. I had 6 years of fun. I am not an alcoholic that'll tell you what is it? I dislike this slogan so much I can't even remember it. My worst day, what is it? My best day sober is better than my worst day drunk? I'm sorry. I had some great days drinking, right? It's kind of like the people that told me that quitting smoking would be the same as coming off heroin. I wondered what kind of heroin they used. Shoo. But what am I going to do about this spiritual malady I'm living with? Well, at age 12, I took a drink, and bam, I had a spiritual awakening. You listen to a real alcoholic talk about when alcohol started working. That doesn't mean it happens the first time for every one of us. But somewhere along there in the beginning, you're going to describe to your sponsor a spiritual awakening. You're not going to just describe something that seemed like it might be fun and it was enjoyable and you liked partying, and you did it once in a while when you wanted to party. You're going to talk about a spiritual awakening. You're going to talk about being able to do stuff you couldn't do a week earlier. Some of you guys remember the girls at the dance that were always on the other side of the room, and you can't get yourself from the corner across the room to ask them to dance. But then you go outside with the right guys and you slam down some booze, you go back in the place. Not only can you ask them, you can ask anybody to dance any way you want to dance, and you're a great dancer. Right? That's a power greater than yourself. Right? The feeling of economic insecurity leaves you. Buy the whole drink a bar. I mean, buy the whole bar a drink, right? You'll know a new peace and a new freedom. Bang, if you don't know that after the first bottle, or half a bottle, or 2.5 bottles. All those 9-step promises happened as a result of alcohol. And I came to believe in a power greater than myself. And when I was new in this program, you know how simple they made it for me? They said, you can come to believe in God the same way you came to believe in booze. And I had no idea what they meant. And I said, well, explain that. And they said, well, did you ever get drunk or come to believe in booze sitting across the street from the liquor store studying a book on what it would be like to drink alcohol? I said, no. They said, well, what did you have to do? I said, well, I had to make a decision, get up off my ass, put one foot in front of the other, walk across the street, buy a bottle of booze, and then take some action, and then I came to believe in alcohol. They said, we do the same thing here. We see it work in others. We make a decision at the 3rd step. We take action in 4 through 9. We get some results outlined in our promises. Then you have faith in God, same way you came to believe in booze. Don't believe in God if you don't. Just say you don't believe, but you know something's happening in your life that you know you couldn't pull off. That's when you realize you're in the grace of God and you come out of that denial, and all of a sudden accomplishments become miracles. The best way to avoid seeing miracles in your life is just take the credit and add it up as another great accomplishment in your wonderful life. My sponsor got sober in the Colorado State Penitentiary on death row. The first day in the penitentiary, some men that did not care about how they might feel about what they had to say, but they cared whether they lived or died, came down to the fish tank and said, if any of you smart bastards think you're doing a great job managing your life, look at the reward the state just gave you for the great job you've been doing. He said he was hooked. Right. 30 years later, he was made the director of the Department of Prisons for the state he was locked up in on death row. And you say Alcoholics Anonymous can't work. Your wildest dream. Do you think that man, when he was in death row, ever dreamed of being... Well, maybe he did. Probably in a stupor, you know, before he got sober in the penitentiary. He said, you know, I'm going to go to the penitentiary, but if I do, I'll come out of there and become the director of the Department of Corrections. Wow, God will surprise you, right? You know how you feel when God's working in your life? Lucky. You know how you feel when God's not working in your life? Unlucky. Right? I was told to look for miracles in really simple things. I didn't need any more big bushes, burning bushes. Big bushes. I didn't need any more big bushes either, right? I was told that it might be a miracle the first Christmas I was invited home, because I was not invited home for a lot of Christmases. And I was invited home for enough Christmases to where I didn't have to go every year for a while. Right? I go to Hawaii and see my cool brother. Because I got past the guilt of doing AA out of guilt from my past, because I made amends. I remember a guy, and I thought it was so cold when I heard it, but I thought, man, the clarity in what he's saying. And it was about a guy who every time we would hear, he seemed to be speaking at this one Friday night meeting that we would always go to in Denver, and he would get to the exact point where I was stealing money from my son's piggy bank, and the tears would come on cue, right? And this guy would lean over to me and he said, those tears are unfinished amends. I got it. I even worked with people for a while in this program for guilt. And there's nothing worse, and there's nothing that'll satisfy it. Not even me making amends, because it's not me making amends. Those of you that have probably gotten to the 8th step or the 9th step, it seems like the whole universe opens up to you and people just start showing up you thought you could never find again. I'll tell you a couple. I had one out here in California, but I'm living in Denver. And I realized I could cause harm long distance. I'm not even living in LA, and I got 4 amends to make out here before I moved here. And found 2 of them. And one of them I was scared to call. We had been engaged in my first 3 years of sobriety. I didn't have the guts to call her yet. And the 4th one, I did the last thing I could do to find her, and I couldn't. And I put a question mark by her name. And I said a prayer, please help me find this girl, Cindy. And not this Cindy, another Cindy. And then I went to speak at a meeting I never would have gone to. Cindy came along. I had to make amends to her later, but this was a long time ago. And I went to speak at a meeting I never would have gone to myself. It was at Dem Bones Barbecue Restaurant at midnight on Santa Monica Boulevard, my friend Michael. And I went there and I told my story, and a lady came up after and said, did you get sober in Denver? I said, yeah. She said, do you know Cindy so-and-so? I said, yeah, I just said a prayer today how to find her. She said, here's her phone number and her address. She's right down the street from you in Santa Monica. Boom. Right? Don't ever let anybody tell you can't make amends to someone who's dead. Even if you don't know where their body is, you can. My two most powerful amends were at graves. One was a man that was closer to me than my father. A man that I admired when I was 17, he was 34, and when I was 24, he died in my arms of a drug overdose of drugs that I bought with my money. And I lived with that for 6 more years of drinking and 3 years of sobriety. And I made amends to his brother, his sister, his mother, his father. I wrote a letter that I read to another man, and I couldn't go to his grave in Las Vegas, and I was in Las Vegas 4 times a year in my first 3 years of sobriety. And on my 3rd birthday, at Caesar's Palace with 3 other friends, and I thought that was appropriate because that man had 4 of us put one of these stars on our hands when we were 17, and they're all dead, and I was going with 3 new guys. And I woke up on my 3rd birthday, and my intuition said, today you're going to his grave. And there was no fight, and there was no resistance, and we got a driver, and we went out to Henderson, Nevada, and I walked from the car to his grave like it was yesterday, and there it was. I walked right to it. I got down on my knees and I said what I needed to say, and I opened my eyes, and I was there on the anniversary of his death, and it was my sobriety date, just different years. I can't do that. I can't pull that off. I can't make that happen. A guy in Texas said to my buddy Mark Houston one time, the idea that you can finish every amends is like thinking you could take a feather pillow to the tallest building in town and throw those feathers out into the air and then go find every one of those feathers. And my friend Mark said right off the top of his head without even thinking, what if you had a personal relationship with the creator of those feathers? Could he take you to each and every one of them? Sure. Can I make those amends? Can I find those people? No. Can I keep myself sober? No. Do I have a choice today? No. See, because if in an unfit spiritual condition there's no choice but to drink, in a fit spiritual condition there is no choice to drink. If you were in a fit spiritual condition, why would you drink? Some people say, God has given me a choice today. He's given me back the choice to drink. My God, what kind of God did you choose at the second step that would give you a choice over something you admitted will kill you? You've given your will to God. Your will is to drink. If you've given your will to God in 4 through 9, then your will to drink should be gone. The problem has been removed, and that's the promises in our book that are not talked about. The 10th and 11th step promises. How many of us have been to meetings where they talked about all the promises before those? The ones on halfway through the 9th step, the ones at the 3rd step, the ones after a 5th step. We've all been to meetings on that, but how many of us have been to meetings that talk about the problem will be removed, sanity will return, you'll be placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected, because those are the promises that alcohol never provided. And those are the promises that are on the other side of the 9th step, when you've entered the world of the Spirit. And not many people ever believe that they can finish every amends they're consciously aware of, even though some will be ongoing. I knew, and I still know today, my amends to my mother will go on the rest of my life. And she died in June. And we were clear. We were so clear the last time I saw her a year and a half ago, she said goodbye to me when I was leaving for the airport with clarity, no drama. It wasn't one of those, oh, I'll never see you again. My mother looked at me across the dining room table, the breakfast table, 10 minutes before I'm leaving after I've been there for a week, and says, this will be the last time we see each other. And I went in the bathroom. It was, it was a little shocking. And I thought, my first thought was selfish. My thought was, why didn't she tell me this on Monday, and we could have worked this out before Sunday? And then I realized, my God, kid, why don't you let her do it the way she wants for once in her life? This is the day she's chosen to say this. Let it be. I always got to get in there and do something with it, right? My nature is to go back in there and say, well, why didn't we talk about this 7 days ago when I arrived? And my intuition said, shut the fuck up. Tell her you love her. You know you're clear. She knows you're clear. And let her do it this way. She said goodbye, and it was the last time we saw each other. A year and a half later, which was this past June, she chose the date. She went like a Tibetan. And I know that because I've just spent the last 5 years in northern India working with Tibetans that helped me a tremendous amount. she chose the date. She called my sister in Columbus. She said, you better come. My sister said, no, you're fine. You know, one of those people that want her to just hold on no matter what. Just don't drink no matter what. Hold on to your delusions. Stay sick. Right? She said, oh, I'll wait for you. You'll come Sunday? Okay, this was a Wednesday. I'll wait for you till Sunday. My sister comes on Sunday. She said, you better call your brother down the street there at the golf club. Right? And they came over. She said, I've made peace with your brother in Texas. I was in Texas at the time. And she said, I've made peace with your brother in Hawaii. And you both better say whatever you need to say, because I'm tired, I'm going to go now. And they said what they needed to say. She laid down and went to sleep. And the doctor said he never saw anything like it. She wasn't even that. She was suffering. She had trouble walking in circulation. And she chose when she wanted to go. And I know that we can do that too. But I also know that because of Alcoholics Anonymous, we get to choose how we want to go. Because believe it or not, no matter how young you are, no matter what delusion you're in about permanence, everyone in this room is going to die, right? With alcoholism. You're either going to die with alcoholism free, or you're going to die with alcoholism bound. And that doesn't mean just drinking. A lot of people die from alcoholism drinking free. They get to go. And what do we do with our self-centered ways? Oh, we're the chosen ones. No, we're the ones left that have to pay their ticket who haven't been free to go yet, right? I don't think we're the chosen ones. I think we're the chosen ones to do some work right here with other alcoholics. But the ones that are really chosen are the ones that got free of alcoholism drinking. Right? They get to go. They paid their ticket. They paid their debt. They did what they had to do. I'm not finished. I'm not done. I'm not done having fun. I went to a Tibetan astrologer once, and he said at the beginning of it, he said, would you like to know the date you're leaving your body? I said, no thanks. I'm having too much fun, and I don't even care if I get to do it again. Right? I'm not afraid of drinking anymore because I know there's nothing I can do to keep myself from drinking. Fear comes from doubt that you can do something about it. Fear comes from agnosticism and self-reliance. I believe in the 12 steps, I believe in the 12 traditions, and I believe in the fellowship. I have a love for the fellowship now I didn't have 5 years ago. Go somewhere where there's no AA for a while and come back to LA where we take the fellowship. There's 10,000 meetings. Go somewhere where there's 2 people and you're really, really thrilled when a 3rd member comes to the group. Right? Go somewhere in the mountains of Colorado where you start a meeting and you sit there in an empty room for 9 months waiting for another alcoholic to show up. Or go to India and you find another alcoholic from the program, and it's like, bam, you found water in the desert. So I came to a new love for the fellowship by not having any for a while. The state of consciousness that I hate more than anything in my life is sobriety. Untreated. I cannot tolerate sobriety. But when I took the treatment, and I was given the power to move through these steps, I came to love the most intolerable situation and the most intolerable state of consciousness from my entire life. And today I love sobriety. Thanks.